The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome to another episode of Speaking with the Senator. I'm Senator Kevin Avard, representing District 12 here in New Hampshire. And today we have the Honorable Paula Johnson on the show, and a firecracker to say the least. And I'm glad that you're on the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me today. Greatly appreciated.
Well, I put in a bill on your behalf.
Yes.
And it passed the Senate overwhelmingly.
I know. I saw when you sent it to me, I saw the names on it, and I couldn't believe it, that we had the Democrats and the Republicans actually working together in behalf of the people of the state. You
would be surprised how many bills that I have that have a good host of Democrats and Republicans on it. And I think in this climate, that's a wonderful thing. But your bill spoke to an issue that I think a lot of people are struggling with. And I call it your bill because it's really a study bill, but it was on your behalf. And it has to do with concierge and people having concierge and high deductibles. And
yes.
Maybe you can explain to me your situation into the audience.
I think what's happening now since the Obamacare came into effect, that it was supposed to work. You were supposed to be able to keep your doctor and keep your plan if you liked it, but that never happened. And then all of a sudden we started seeing the cost of health care rising more and more. What used to be a high deductible for catastrophic illness is becoming the everyday to-day deductible now. You know, $7,500 a year, $10,000 a year, and it gets out of control.
Years ago, when I used to sell health insurance, I was a broker. We had options. There was the mega plan from Massachusetts, from Mass Mutual, and there were a whole host of other options, especially for small businesses. And that got whittled away. Somehow that got ruined, if you will. But one of the options that we offered people, if you wanted a lower premium, you had a higher deductible because you had more risk. You assumed more risk to cover on your own. So generally, businesses would have $250, $500, oh my gosh, $1,000 deductible? But that lowered your premium from, say, $1,200 a month to $800 a month if you're a business. And then you could offer that to an employee. Well, lo and behold, now we have deductibles, like you said, $7,000, $10,000, $20,000, and the premiums are
$500-600 a month for two people. And the sad thing is, and I understand where, back in those days, because my husband and I were self-employed. And then when the HMOs came, all of a sudden our insurance costs were rising for five of us. And we used to buy it across the border in Massachusetts because we got a better rate.
Right.
And then that got taken away. And so what's happened now is that you're starting with your deductible, but you're also talking you're out of pocket anywhere from, you can't even do $1,000 anymore. Right. It's $2,000, $2,500, and if you want to keep your costs down. Well, I want to thank Nancy Pelosi, basically, because she said, with this new tax cuts, all we're getting is crumbs. But I thank those crumbs because my husband's insurance just went up on two of us from $512 a month to $543. And we were going to go to the $400 and like $93 a month plan. But my out-of-pocket was $2,500, which wasn't bad. But my deductible for the year was $10,000, from $7,000 to $10,000. And where I've had some health issues over the last 3 years, I said to my husband, can we take that chance? Because one bad health issue can wipe you out.
Correct.
Can put you into bankruptcy. And no one's going to help the middle class here, helping us because we pay for everybody else.
I think it's very unfortunate Nancy Pelosi called those crumbs. We're seeing a benefit in our house. Maybe it's $50 a week or $100 extra a week, a better return.
But that's still something that you didn't have before.
Correct.
And being that I guess I'm still deplorable person out there, which I relish. I think it's great. I love being deplorable. But the importance of this bill, when I called and asked you, and we sat down for coffee and I explained it to you, was because I know that my doctor charges my husband like $200 a year to be in the practice. And I had talked to many people who were saying to me that in order to stay in their doctor's practices, they were $1,000, $1,600 a year.
Wow.
Now, you take that and add that, $400 a year isn't bad, but if you take the thousands and add it right on top of what you're already paying for premiums, I mean, you're talking $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, if
Right.
not more. And the sad thing is that and I called Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield and complained about this, and they didn't care because it doesn't affect them. And what's happened is that the doctors are still participating providers. So it's almost like they're getting doubled, you know? They're not making enough. Well, it's not our fault, you know, that this happened with Obamacare. A lot of us was foreseeing what was going to happen. I mean, and we still might be bailing out these insurance companies because it's part of the Obamacare. And so now what we have to do is we have to get back and take a look at the consumers. How are they going to be able to afford this? Because when the economy is good and you have more money in your paycheck, it's more expendable cash that you put back into the economy. But we keep putting it back into the health insurance, and it shouldn't be a single payer. It can be worked out. But Congress again failed the American people. They failed us again. They just failed us with a tax budget down there. I mean, how much more are we going to allow them to fail us? They work for us.
Well, they did it with the ACA, with the Obamacare.
Right.
You have to pass the bill before we can find out what's in it, is what Nancy Pelosi said. Now, that wouldn't work in New Hampshire.
No.
You can't pass a bill without having committee hearings, without having people represented, people presented. Every bill has to be heard. Then it gets voted on. Then it has to go to the House to be examined. What was thrusted upon the American people was a tragedy with Obamacare. Now we have this new budget, which is crazy. It's the same thing. I mean, this has got to stop. This has to stop.
It does. And the sad thing is that, again, when they passed this budget, it was almost like at the dead of night. If you want to know what's in this budget, you have to pass it. How do they do this at the last minute? They're so dysfunctional down in Washington. They're beyond swamp now. They're
Right.
beyond the swamp. They have no desire to work for any of us in this country. They're self-serving individuals. And in 2018, we need to put the right people into office down in Washington.
I think both parties are very guilty of this.
I say that all the time. I don't like either party. I don't like either party. I'd rather be an independent. I am a Republican right now. I don't want to be called a rhino because I vote very conservatively. My views have always been conservative. My views, whether I was on the Board of Ed, the alderman or the state rep, was always, I'm here to serve my constituents, no matter what level I was at. And I took great pride in that. I mean, people would say to me they might not like the way I voted or some of the things, but they always said to me, you listen to both sides of the argument.
Right.
And that's what you have to do to be, I truly feel, to be a successful elected official. You're there to represent the people. And you see in the State House, the lobbyists. We have it down here in Nashua, the lobbyists. And I feel that they are a disservice because they're the ones at times, especially in Washington, that getting their bills passed that's not in favor of us, of the American citizens who pay for all this.
There was a bill that we recently voted on in the Senate, and it caused me great heartburn. I was actually a co-sponsor on it. And it had to do with, it's a constitutional amendment, CACR, and it has to do with the victims' rights. Who's against victim rights? Nobody's against victim rights. I co-sponsored this in a heartbeat. I've interviewed people on my TV show that were victims of the system, where not only were people brutally hurt, they were injured on the job, but the people that did the injury had the lawyers, and they got out of it, and it made them a victim twice. So I signed on to this bill. But one of the things that really troubles me about this bill called Marsy's Law is that it creates, if the people vote for it, an immunity built into the Constitution for those who violate your rights. You can't make this up. You can't make it up. So, yes, we have to honor the fact that you're a victim, and we have to disclose the fact that you have a right to hear it. But you know what? If we fail to do that, you can't do anything about it, because in the Constitution, we're protecting ourselves. I just can't swallow that pill, and so I couldn't vote for it. But these are the things that was really pushed upon us. And you got to vote for it, or the people or the Democrats are going to come after you and say that you're not for victims. And the lobbyists were there; they were pushing hard. Some lobbyists do a service. I have to admit, you can get a lot of information, but I know that pressure. I know that pressure was heavy just recently.
Well, I remember at the State House, I put in, I believe, the first hands-free bill for the cell phones. And it was a second offense. That's when we had those little flip phones and we held it, and there was no Bluetooths or anything. And I worked with Verizon and some other cellular companies. And what happened was Sprint came in with their lawyer and killed the bill. And then when I went to Sprint, I saw on their counter was, always use hand-free devices. And I said to them and to my daughter, why would they kill a bill like this? They don't make the money on the cell phone, especially back then, because they broke, you got a new one. You make it on the accessories. And they killed my bill. And that was the beginning of it, because I saw back then the problems, everybody on the cell phone. Now we know it's against the law.
Well, now it's against the law, and it's interesting. We have a lot of issues with the marches, and more people are killed because of those cell phones in your hands than gun violence. And
well, I'm glad you said that,
Yeah.
Kevin, because what are we going to do? Take cell phones away from people, and people run over people. They get killed. They're murdered by knives and drunk driving. Are we going to take cars away from people?
we had a 20-year-old kid just putting out bombs.
Yeah.
I call him a kid, but so I think there's an issue that needs to be addressed is where have we gone as a culture? Why are we doing this? We got rid of the Marlboro Man. Do you remember the Marlboro Man?
Yes, I do. I'm that old.
Yeah, so am I. Winston tastes good like a cigarette should.
I remember.
And Virginia Slims and Salem and Newports and
Cools.
And Cools. And all of these were banned from television. Why? Because they influence kids. They influence kids and our culture to smoke. If you look at a lot of the black and whites, you almost want to choke just watching all. When I talk about black and whites, TV.
I know. I'm glad you clarified that.
The television, the black and white television, or the silver screen, whatever. Everybody's smoking.
Everybody's smoking.
And you want to cough just watching the show. Why did we get rid of that? Because it influenced our culture. Now we have the cell phones where the kids are watching YouTubes, they're watching hours and hours of video games. Bang, bang.
Bang, bang. Yep.
Life isn't important. They're just inanimate objects, or they're shooting at Black Ops. If the Marlboro Man was so harmful, why is it that these video games are not?
Don't you remember during Al Gore and his wife Tipper, they started labeling the movies for ages, and I thought back then, why are we doing this? But my children, when HBO came on, I never had HBO in the house. I didn't allow my boys to watch those violence, because society, if we look at the way society is, we have more parents that are single now.
Right.
We don't have the households. We don't have the upbringing the way we used to. And when we glorify this on television, it's a shame. But in my opinion, I don't believe that a lot of these kids really understand that their rights are being taken away from them later in life. Because when they were interviewing, I was watching Fox, I can't remember, I think it might have been Laura Ingraham program, that one of them, they went out and asked these kids, do you understand the Second Amendment? They didn't even know. Do you understand what a semi-automatic is? They couldn't even say that. So they're marching and they're protesting. And you have to question, how much have they learned about this? Well, schools are indoctrinating our kids now.
Well, it's interesting because they used to teach gun safety in schools.
They used to teach a lot in school. That should have been taught.
We didn't have this amount out of violence and disregard for human life. I think one of the things that was very troubling was that this individual, that Cruz kid that had the mental issues, there were red flags.
Yes.
23, 30, an area of that, and of red flags popping up. And there are laws, there were protocols, the system did nothing.
And you know why?
So now we want to add another layer. Why? If you're not doing what you're supposed to do, you're failing the people, and the system broke down.
Well, there was an agreement between the superintendent, if you read it, and the sheriff's department because of federal funding. Because if they had too much disorderly conduct, too many kids that had issues, that were misbehaving to a certain extent. I'm just trying to remember the article. They I believe, wouldn't get the federal funding. So they pushed a lot of this underneath the rug. I mean, it's all for the mighty federal dollars now. That's what it is. It's all for the federal dollars, which he should have been reported. There were problems. They had the red flags at the school. And how many other kids? And the problem is we're not identifying what's wrong with, and it shouldn't be just the schools. Where are the parents' responsibilities that if you see your kid has some issues here, and the kid is being bullied, and why aren't the parents involved anymore? When I was on the Board of Ed, I wanted the parents' involvement. We're not seeing that anymore. And when you have the breakdown of the family and the parents' involvement, then I truly believe that you're going to see more of this. And we can put in as many gun laws as we want. We can take the guns away from the law-abiding citizens, and we could be like Chicago, one of the toughest gun laws out there, and watching people getting shot up every day. But until you do what's on the books, I don't care if you do a little bit more extensive background check.
Nobody does. Everybody's for it.
Everybody's for that. But don't take my rights away, and I don't own a gun. But don't take my rights away if I'm a law-abiding citizen and I want to own a gun, because this person didn't go through the background checks. He has issues, and we're still giving it to him.
I think if there were going to be any organized marches, that they should be organized to protest the fact that the system failed the kids.
That's exactly right.
The system failed the kids. In New Hampshire, we already have system protocols. Every school should be enforcing them. I wonder how many are actually doing them.
You know, Kevin, as I look around the city and what's going on here, and I want to just jump in a little bit on something else, change the subject a little bit, with the last election that we just had. And I kind of do my research on everything, and someone said something to me, and I did my research regarding who's filing their campaign receipts and who's not filing the campaign receipts. And I brought this in because you can even read this, that this is an email that I sent to the city clerk regarding NRO 23 about violations and penalties. And when we don't uphold this, and I asked the city clerk who upholds this, and she says the police. Well, the police can't do it unless you tell them that there's a violation, and would have to go through the Board of Aldermen, like they do with the dog licenses. Because I said, hey, you're doing with dog licenses. You had to bring it to the Board of Aldermen, and they accepted. The board committed the warrant to the chief of police or his designee. Well, that's what we have to do. People on PACs that are contributing money to people, candidates that are running, and they're not filing their papers, their receipts.
In the local election?
Of course, in the local election. But I think what's more important here, and I don't know if this should be a state level, that, if you take money from PACs, like the unions, when you go to vote, you should have to declare that you've taken money before that vote.
Well, we have to do it when we run for a rep or a state senate. We have to do that.
Well, we have to do it in national. You have to do your receipts. But when you're voting, and somebody didn't file their paper, and we caught it, and they finally filed it. But when you have your PACs here, your unions, and they're not filing in 10 years, the city clerk tells me 10 years. So in 10 years, you haven't done anything. And city clerk says to me, you know what? We don't look at every campaign finance, receipts that come in. Well, maybe you should. Because in the NRO, it says here, any candidate, person, or political committee failing to comply with the provisions of this article shall, upon conviction, be guilty of a violation and fined not more than $100 each day that lack of compliance exists. Each day that the lack of compliance exists shall constitute a separate offense.
Is this something that should be brought before the Attorney General's office?
Well, my friend, I guess they said it does. They're not the ones to oversee this. I don't know, but we've been told it's the police. Well, the police can't oversee something unless there's an offense, there's a conviction that they have to go out. So, and
I'm surprised the police are involved with this. It wouldn't be
They're not involved at this point in time, but they wouldn't be most likely unless the Board of Aldermen, like with the licenses, that's what I would say, because it's not very clear in the NRO who really has the jurisdiction of this, for it to comply, who would oversee the compliance? Well, chances are, I would think, in my opinion, it would be the city clerk. And then if the city clerk sees that they're not getting what they need, that they would then bring it before the Board of Aldermen, saying that they, just like with the dog license at the Board of Aldermen meeting, to go after people who didn't register their dogs. So they did that. So this would most likely would go before the aldermen, and they would have to, the police, the chief of police or her designee, go out and collect the money. Because the law went into effect in 2007, it was an ordinance, and was going into effect in 2009, I believe. So from 2009 to now, if they haven't filed any papers, the unions, there's two unions out there, then I have to do it. Everybody has to comply with the law. And so I'm a little concerned with this in the city, that sometimes we overlook things, and why, I don't know. But, the law is the law.
The law is the law.
And this way, it lets people see, because in front of, when you're at the Board of Ed or the Board of Aldermen meeting and they're voting on something, if they've gotten money, let's say,
you want to know
from the
who's
teachers'
influencing.
union
Right.
and the firefighters' union, you want to know who they took the money from. And it's rightly so. Because in my opinion, and I've always said even to the Board of Aldermen, you're getting money from them. Now you're casting your vote for them. I never took money from any of the unions. Not that they offered me, but I wouldn't take it anyway. Only because I don't feel it's right, in my opinion, that you're taking the money from these PACs. And then, like even at the State House, $100 a year, you get paid. You get all this money from everybody, and are you beholden at the end to cast that vote?
Right.
And that's what you call transparency. When you make sure that people are aware that, everybody, I've got this piece of legislation here, I've got this contract here, and I took money from this particular union, and I just want to let everybody know that it's transparent, that I'm voting for this, not because I took the money, because I felt the contract was fair and equitable. That's the way it should be.
We recently had a vote on a particular issue where one of the senators is an attorney, and she basically represents a particular group, and she was voting on the piece of legislation that affects the people that she represents and is being paid for. And within the ethics guidelines, as long as you declare it, which she declared that she had an interest and that she was still going to continue, and that follows within the ethic guidelines. So, but it is interesting that you can be paid as an attorney to represent a group and then also vote on that particular piece of legislation.
See, to me, it would be a conflict of interest.
A lot of us feel that way, but within our ethics guidelines, it's still allowable. We did have one senator that was actually a lobbyist for one of the groups, and he recently passed, but he would lobby and would also, as a senator, vote on the very issues that he lobbied for. So that happens in New Hampshire, and as long as you declare it within the ethics guidelines.
The transparency is there. No one can come back and say, well, you didn't tell us.
Right.
But
And so something like this, they should at least say, hey, you know what, we received that. And that way the people at least know what they're getting.
right, and then you say to everybody, you know what? Although I did take a contribution from them, but you know what? I read the contract, I read this, and I felt that it was equitable at this point in time. You know, if I felt it was overstretched, whatever, maybe I wouldn't vote for it. One time when I was on the board, there was. I can't remember her name, but she was working in the administration, and I had worked with her in securing a loan for my husband's business. And I just came right out and said, you know what? I'm not gonna vote for her.
Right.
I'm just going to recuse myself, because if I vote against her, then it could be, well, you didn't like her because of past, or if I vote for her, it was because she did
Right.
more for me.
It's a no-win situation,
It's
backing off.
And the best thing to do, I think, sometimes is just say, you know what? I'm going to recuse myself, clean hands, and and that's the way it is.
So can we count on you to run for state rep this time around?
I don't know. I don't know right now.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of things on my plate right now,
Yeah.
and I don't know. A lot of people have asked me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm considering it. My husband's not happy. He's finally said, "Oh, she said she has no feelings. She doesn't want to run anymore. It's all gone. It's like the maternal instincts after a while are gone." And I just don't know.
It's like being in a band when you gig and you're out there in the front and you're enjoying the music and you've got your peeps with you and you're making music. It's wonderful. And then when it stops, you have this void, and you kind of got to get back into the swing of things, even if it's for a term or two. But
well, I had that void. And then I was on the Trump campaign, and that void kind of went away.
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of television for him. I'm very proud. Did 5 opening speeches for him. He entrusted me. He always called me his friend from New Hampshire. And you would see at times, when he saw me, he would, "Hi, there's my friend from New Hampshire." So I kind of filled that void with
how do you think
Trump.
he's doing?
I think he's doing a fantastic job. I look at the economy. I work in retail, and it's booming. Retail is starting to pick up, and that's because more expendable cash, those crumbs are coming into people's paychecks.
Yeah.
And I think people are more confident in the economy. The stock market is doing better. So I think if he keeps us going, I'd like to see the wall down on the southern border, and hopefully we'll get that. And I'm back on I'll be on the Trump train for 2020.
All right.
I want him back in that White House, because he is making America great again. We will be great again, and we won't hate winning so much. We'll love the winning.
Well, we got just 37 seconds. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
And we appreciate you coming, and we appreciate candor and frankness. And
That's me.
And that is you. So you have to come on again.
I will, anytime you ask me.
And that's it for this show. Thanks for watching Speaking with the Senator. Until next week, we'll see you.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.